"Don't follow me, Mr. Carter. You won't like what you find." Maya Johnson never raised her voice, yet those words stopped William Carter more effectively than any boardroom challenge ever had. She pulled off her black apron with trembling hands, placed it neatly beside the employee entrance, and disappeared into the cold Chicago night before anyone could ask another question. Inside Carter House, the city's most exclusive restaurant, crystal glasses chimed beneath golden chandeliers while a string quartet floated through the dining room. Million-dollar conversations continued over aged bourbon and imported steak as though nothing unusual had happened. But William no longer heard the music. He kept staring at the service door where his quietest waitress had vanished only seconds earlier. Maya had worked there for almost 18 months. She never arrived late. She never complained. She never accepted charity. She smiled politely, remembered every guest's favorite drink, and somehow made herself almost invisible in rooms filled with people who believed money deserved the brightest spotlight. William respected efficiency, not people. At 39, the billionaire founder of Carter Global believed emotion slowed decisions and compassion belonged in marketing campaigns, not executive meetings. His empire stretched across hospitals, insurance companies, logistics firms, and technology startups. Every hour of his day was scheduled. Every minute produced profit. Following an employee through downtown Chicago at nearly 10 o'clock on a Thursday night was exactly the kind of irrational decision he would have mocked only yesterday. Yet something about Maya's eyes refused to leave his mind. They were not frightened. They were exhausted. There was a difference, and somehow he recognized it. As he stepped outside, icy November wind swept across the sidewalk. Maya climbed into an aging yellow cab that looked as tired as the city itself. Without thinking twice, William slipped behind the wheel of his black SUV and kept several car lengths behind. The skyline glittered like polished silver while traffic thinned beneath elevated train tracks. They passed luxury hotels, expensive condominiums, designer storefronts, and eventually neighborhoods the city's wealthiest residents rarely visited. Streetlights grew farther apart. Buildings became older. The roads lost their shine. 23 minutes later, the cab stopped beneath a faded blue sign that read St. Margaret Community Hospital. William frowned. It wasn't the kind of hospital his executives donated to for publicity photographs. The emergency entrance looked worn. Paint peeled from concrete walls. Families bundled in heavy coats waited quietly outside beneath humming fluorescent lights. Maya rushed through the sliding doors without even looking back. William remained inside his vehicle, watching her disappear into the building. Then he noticed something lying near the curb where she had stepped from the cab. A plain white envelope fluttered beneath the breeze until it rested against his polished leather shoe. He bent down and picked it up. Across the front, written in careful blue ink, were 5 simple words that made his heart beat slow for reasons he couldn't explain. Final notice. Pediatric Oncology Department. William turned the envelope over in his hands, but did not open it. For the first time in years, curiosity lost its battle with respect. Whatever waited inside belonged to Maya, not to him. He tucked the envelope carefully beneath the windshield wiper of his vehicle, intending to return it before she noticed it was gone. Yet his eyes drifted back toward the hospital entrance. Families moved through the automatic doors carrying blankets, backpacks, paper coffee cups, and hope that looked thinner than the November air surrounding them. Expensive hospitals displayed marble floors and digital artwork. St. Margaret displayed faded paint, worn chairs, and volunteers handing out warm soup. William had invested hundreds of millions of dollars into healthcare companies, but he had never actually stood outside a place like this. Numbers on quarterly reports suddenly had faces. Minutes passed before he finally stepped inside. The scent of disinfectant mixed with burnt coffee lingered in the quiet hallway. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead while nurses hurried from room to room with practiced determination. Nobody recognized the billionaire whose photograph had appeared on business magazine covers for nearly a decade. Without a tailored conference room or a security team surrounding him, William looked like any other man waiting for difficult news. From the end of the corridor, he caught sight of Maya. She was no longer the composed waitress who balanced silver trays with effortless grace. She hurried toward the reception desk, carefully counting folded bills and loose dollar bills before placing them into the clerk's hands. She apologized softly when the amount came up short. Her shoulders remained straight, even as exhaustion weighed on every movement. She did not ask for sympathy. She simply asked whether another payment extension might be possible. The woman behind the counter offered a tired but gentle smile and quietly explained that the hospital had already granted several extensions. Maya lowered her eyes for only a second before thanking her anyway. Then she reached into her purse and removed a small envelope filled with tip money from that evening's shift. Every dollar she had earned serving wealthy strangers disappeared across the counter in silence. William stood frozen behind a vending machine, unseen. He had watched billion-dollar negotiations without blinking. He had closed acquisitions worth more than entire neighborhoods. Yet nothing had prepared him for the sight of a woman surrendering every dollar she possessed without hesitation. A volunteer approached Maya with a cafeteria meal voucher. She smiled warmly but declined it, asking instead if the voucher could be given to another family waiting with young children. The volunteer hesitated before nodding. Maya thanked her once more and walked deeper into the pediatric wing, carrying nothing except a worn canvas backpack. William remained where he was, unable to explain the unfamiliar weight settling inside his chest. Then a nurse walked past him holding a patient chart. The name printed across the top caught his attention before she turned the corner. Eli Johnson, age 8, pediatric oncology. William whispered the name to himself without realizing it. Somewhere beyond those quiet doors was the child Maya had chosen over sleep, comfort, pride, and every dollar she earned. For the first time in many years, the wealthiest man in the building felt completely powerless. William should have walked away. Every instinct that had built his empire told him this was none of his business. Yet his feet carried him quietly through the pediatric hallway until he reached a partially open door. Soft laughter drifted into the corridor, so unexpected that it seemed almost out of place inside a cancer ward. He glanced inside without crossing the threshold. Maya sat beside a small hospital bed, carefully unfolding a paper bag. Instead of an expensive dinner she had carried home from the restaurant, she placed a simple peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, and a carton of milk onto the rolling table. The boy's face brightened as though she had delivered a holiday feast. "Did you eat, Maya?" the child asked with innocent concern. She smiled warmly and nodded without hesitation. "I already had dinner before I came, buddy." William immediately recognized the familiar lie. He had watched her hand every dollar from her tips to the cashier less than 15 minutes earlier. There had been no dinner. There had only been sacrifice. The little boy grinned and broke the sandwich exactly in half. "Then you can have dessert with me." He held out a single chocolate chip cookie wrapped in clear plastic. Maya laughed softly and accepted the tiny gift as though it were worth a fortune. She thanked him with such sincerity that William found himself looking away for a moment. He had attended charity galas where donors pledged millions beneath flashing cameras. Yet the smallest act of generosity he had witnessed all year came from an 8-year-old child offering half of his dessert to the person protecting his world. A nurse entered the room carrying medication and smiled at Maya. "He waited to fall asleep until you finished your shift again." Maya brushed a hand gently across the boy's forehead. "I promised I would always come." The nurse adjusted the blanket before quietly saying, "Dr. Alvarez wants to discuss tomorrow's treatment plan when you have a minute." Maya nodded, but the brief smile on her face faded almost instantly. After the nurse left, she reached into her backpack and removed a folder packed with bills, insurance forms, handwritten notes, and appointment schedules. The edges were worn from being opened countless times. She carefully organized each page with remarkable patience, as though keeping everything perfectly straight could somehow keep hope alive. William remained hidden outside the room, unable to leave. Through the narrow opening in the door, he watched Maya kiss the top of the boy's head before whispering, "You just keep getting stronger. I will figure out everything else." There was no audience to impress, no wealthy customer watching, no manager evaluating her performance. Only an exhausted young woman making a promise she had no guarantee she could keep. Moments later, Dr. Elena Alvarez approached carrying another file. Her expression was kind but heavy with concern. "Maya," she said gently, "there is one more option we should discuss. It has a strong success rate, but it is expensive, and the insurance appeal was denied again this afternoon." Maya closed her eyes for only a heartbeat before asking the question William would never forget. "How much more time can I buy him while I keep working?" Dr. Elena Alvarez did not answer immediately. Years of delivering difficult conversations had taught her that silence sometimes carried more kindness than hurried reassurance. She glanced through the chart before looking back at Maya with gentle honesty. The treatment cannot wait much longer. Every week matters now. Maya nodded slowly as though she had expected those words long before they were spoken. Fear flickered across her face for only an instant before determination quietly replaced it. "Then I will work more hours," she replied. "I will find another job if I have to." Dr. Alvarez rested a compassionate hand on the folder overflowing with unpaid invoices. "You are already working more than anyone should. This is not a question of effort." Maya lowered her eyes. She knew that. No number of overnight shifts could stretch 24 hours into 48. No amount of determination could make medical bills disappear. Before the doctor could continue, a small voice interrupted from the bed. "Are you talking about money again?" Eli asked. Maya turned immediately, her smile returning with practiced ease. "No, sweetheart. We are talking about how stubborn you are because you keep getting stronger every day." Eli laughed softly. "Good. Because when I get better, I am going to buy you a really big house." Maya chuckled and brushed a curl away from his forehead. "How big are we talking?" The boy stretched both arms as wide as he could. "Big enough that you never have to work at the restaurant again." The room filled with quiet laughter. William remained hidden outside the doorway, unable to explain why his own eyes suddenly felt heavier than before. He had spent years listening to ambitious presentations about billion-dollar real estate projects. Yet none of them had carried the simple beauty of an 8-year-old dreaming about giving his sister a home. As Eli slowly drifted to sleep, Maya carefully tucked the blanket around his shoulders and kissed his forehead once more. She waited until his breathing became steady before following Dr. Alvarez into a small consultation room across the hall. William moved closer without being seen, stopping just outside the partially closed door. "There is something else you deserve to know," Dr. Alvarez said quietly. The appeal was not denied by the hospital. It was denied by the insurance provider. She slid a document across the desk. Maya looked at the familiar corporate logo printed across the top of the page. Carter Health Alliance, a division of Carter Global. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, but never complained. "I figured it probably was," she answered calmly. "They said the treatment was not considered medically necessary under the current policy." Dr. Alvarez sighed. "Medically, I disagree completely. Unfortunately, policies do not always listen to doctors." Maya folded the letter with extraordinary care and placed it back inside her folder as though she had already accepted another impossible burden. "Then I will keep appealing," she whispered. "Someone has to read it eventually." Outside the room, William felt the blood drain from his face. He recognized the policy number immediately. 2 years earlier, he had personally approved a cost reduction initiative designed to improve shareholder performance across every insurance subsidiary. He had signed hundreds of pages without reading every medical clause. At the time, they had looked like percentages, projections, and efficiency targets. Tonight, they had become a little boy waiting behind a hospital door and a young woman sacrificing every dollar she earned while believing that somewhere inside his company, someone might finally choose compassion over paperwork. William remained motionless long after Maya and Dr. Elena Alvarez left the consultation room. The hallway seemed quieter than before, yet every sound suddenly carried unbearable weight. The squeak of a nurse's shoes across polished linoleum, the distant beeping of heart monitors, the whispered prayers from exhausted families waiting through another long night, all blended into a reality he had spent decades avoiding. Numbers had become names. Policies had become people. He slowly reached into the inside pocket of his tailored coat and pulled out his phone. The glowing screen reflected across his face as he searched through archived executive documents stored on the company's secure network. It took less than 2 minutes to locate the initiative he had signed 2 years earlier. The title sounded harmless enough. Pediatric Specialty Care Cost Optimization Program. Beneath it sat his own electronic signature alongside dozens of executive approvals. William read line after line until one paragraph forced him to stop breathing for a moment. Experimental treatment reimbursement would require additional review under revised financial guidelines. It was written in polished corporate language designed to reassure investors and satisfy attorneys. Yet standing only a few yards away from Eli's hospital room, William finally understood what those carefully chosen words meant in the real world. They meant delay. They meant another appeal. They meant another family waiting for permission while time quietly slipped away. He lowered the phone, unable to continue reading. Somewhere beyond the hallway window, snow had begun falling over Chicago, covering streets, rooftops, and sidewalks with silent precision. It reminded him how easily the world could hide difficult truths beneath a clean white surface. A volunteer carrying blankets paused beside him. "Are you waiting for someone?" she asked kindly. William hesitated before answering. "I think I am waiting for myself to understand something." The volunteer smiled politely, not recognizing the billionaire standing before her. Hospitals have a way of doing that. She continued down the hallway, offering warm blankets to families preparing for another sleepless night. William watched her disappear before looking back toward Eli's room. Through the narrow glass window, he could see Maya sitting beside the bed again. She had opened a children's adventure book, changing her voice for every character while Eli listened with sleepy eyes and an exhausted smile. She never glanced at the clock. She never checked her phone. The outside world simply stopped existing whenever she sat beside him. William suddenly remembered seeing her arrive early for every shift at Carter House, always carrying the same worn canvas backpack. He had assumed she was merely hardworking. Now he realized she had probably come straight from this hospital almost every single day. Every smile she offered demanding customers had been carried on the shoulders of someone already fighting a battle nobody else could see. His chest tightened as another memory surfaced. Only 3 weeks earlier, one of his senior managers had suggested terminating Maya because she had requested 2 schedule adjustments for medical appointments. William had approved the recommendation without asking a single question, believing consistency mattered more than individual circumstances. The termination paperwork had not yet been processed because the restaurant manager insisted Maya remained one of the finest employees on staff. For the first time in his career, William felt profoundly grateful that someone lower in the company hierarchy had quietly ignored his decision. If that manager had followed orders exactly, Maya might have lost the one job keeping hope alive for the little boy sleeping only a few steps away. William stepped away from the window before Maya could notice him. For the first time in his life, he felt ashamed of walking through a hospital wearing a tailored coat that cost more than an entire family might spend on groceries in a month. Wealth had always opened doors for him. Tonight it only reminded him of every door that had remained closed to someone else. He found an empty waiting area overlooking the snow-covered parking lot and sat alone. His phone vibrated repeatedly with messages from board members asking about tomorrow morning's acquisition meeting, but he ignored every notification. None of those conversations mattered anymore. Instead, he opened the employee database and searched for Maya Johnson. Her personnel file appeared within seconds. She had never missed a shift without notice. Customer satisfaction scores placed her among the highest performers at Carter House. Every manager evaluation described her with nearly identical words: reliable, respectful, calm under pressure, outstanding work ethic. Then he reached the emergency contact section. Eli Johnson, younger brother. Legal guardian listed as Maya Johnson. William stared at the screen longer than he realized. She was not only supporting a sick child. She had become his family long before anyone inside the company had learned her name. A quiet voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me, sir, are you waiting for room 312? An elderly volunteer carrying a basket of knitted blankets smiled kindly. William shook his head. "No, I am trying to understand someone who works for me." The woman nodded as though she had heard that sentence many times before. Sometimes people wear uniforms so often that the world forgets they have lives after their shift ends. Her words settled deeply inside him. He thanked her softly, and she continued down the hallway greeting every family with the same gentle warmth regardless of how they were dressed or what they could afford. A few minutes later, Dr. Elena Alvarez emerged from the pediatric wing, carrying another stack of charts. She noticed William sitting alone and assumed he belonged to one of the waiting families. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. William stood. For a brief moment, he considered introducing himself as the chief executive officer of Carter Global. Instead, he answered honestly, "I believe my company has made your job much harder than it should be." The doctor studied his face with quiet curiosity. Before she could respond, his phone rang again. This time it was the president of Carter Health Alliance. Without taking his eyes off the pediatric hallway, William answered the call. "Move tomorrow's board meeting to the afternoon," he said firmly. "I want every denial connected to pediatric oncology placed on my desk before 9 o'clock. Every appeal, every policy revision, every executive recommendation. Do not summarize anything." There was a long pause on the other end. "Is something wrong?" the executive finally asked. William looked through the glass once more. Inside the room, Maya had fallen asleep in the chair beside Eli's bed, still wearing her restaurant uniform, one hand resting gently on the edge of the mattress, as though even in sleep she refused to let him feel alone. William swallowed hard before answering. "Yes, something has been wrong for a very long time. I just did not have the courage to see it until tonight." The hospital settled into the strange stillness that only arrived after midnight. The hallways grew quieter, conversations became whispers, and even the machines seemed to soften their rhythm as exhausted families surrendered to another uncertain night. Snow continued drifting beyond the windows, covering the parking lot in a clean white blanket that made the city outside feel impossibly far away. William remained where he was, unable to convince himself to leave. His entire world had shifted inside a single evening, yet Maya knew nothing about the storm unfolding within him. Shortly after 1 o'clock, she carefully opened Eli's room without making a sound. She checked his blanket, adjusted the pillow beneath his head, and smiled when she saw him sleeping peacefully. Then she quietly stepped into the hallway, stretched her tired shoulders, and leaned against the wall for only a moment before reaching for her phone. William stood far enough away that she never noticed him. "Hello, Mrs. Henderson," Maya said softly after the call connected. "I'm so sorry for calling this late. I wanted to ask if I could cover your breakfast shift tomorrow morning." "Yes, I know I already work tonight. I just need a few more hours this week." She listened for a moment before thanking the woman several times. "I really appreciate it. I promise I will not let you down." She ended the call, closed her eyes, and took one slow breath before forcing another smile onto her face and returning to Eli's room as though nothing had happened. William felt his heart sink. She was not asking for time to rest. She was asking for more work, more hours, more exhaustion, more sacrifices. Every solution she could imagine required only one person to carry a burden that should never have belonged to her alone. A nurse approached with a clipboard and stopped beside Maya. "You should get some sleep too," she said kindly. Maya smiled with quiet gratitude. "I cannot. If I leave now, I can still get home for 2 hours before my morning shift." The nurse frowned gently. "You cannot keep doing this forever." Maya looked through the window at Eli sleeping peacefully beneath the soft hospital light. "Forever is not what I am trying to reach," she answered. "I am only trying to reach tomorrow." Those words struck William harder than any financial report, shareholder meeting, or market collapse he had ever experienced. Tomorrow. That was all she was asking from life. Not luxury, not recognition, not fairness. Just one more tomorrow for the little boy depending on her. As Maya quietly walked toward the elevators, something slipped from the canvas backpack resting on her shoulder. A folded photograph drifted onto the polished floor without her noticing. William waited until the elevator doors closed before picking it up. It showed a much younger Maya wearing a college graduation gown, laughing beside Eli, who could not have been more than 4 years old. Written across the bottom in fading blue ink were the words, "You promised we would always chase tomorrow together." William stared at the photograph until the letters blurred before his eyes. In that silent hallway, surrounded by families fighting battles invisible to the outside world, he made a promise of his own. When the sun rose over Chicago only a few hours from now, Maya Johnson would no longer be standing alone against a system that his own signature had helped create. The first light of morning had not yet reached the windows when William Carter walked out of St. Margaret Community Hospital with Maya's photograph still resting carefully inside his coat pocket. Snow crunched beneath his polished shoes as he crossed the nearly empty parking lot, but he no longer noticed the cold. His mind replayed every moment from the night before. Maya counting crumpled dollar bills at the reception desk. Eli smiling over half of a chocolate chip cookie. The quiet promise written beneath an old family photograph. By the time he reached his vehicle, he understood one painful truth. He could not erase the past, but he could refuse to let the future look the same. At exactly 6 o'clock that morning, The executive conference room at Carter Global filled with confused senior leaders who had been called in hours before sunrise. Coffee cups remained untouched as William entered carrying a thin folder instead of his usual presentation. There were no greetings, no discussion about quarterly earnings, no charts projected across the wall. He placed a single insurance denial letter in the center of the conference table. Every executive immediately recognized the company letterhead. Who approved this policy? William asked quietly. The chief legal officer cleared his throat. The Pediatric Specialty Care Cost Optimization Program was unanimously approved by the Executive Committee 2 years ago. William nodded once. And who signed the final authorization? An uncomfortable silence settled across the room before the chief financial officer answered. You did. William looked around the table without anger. Then the responsibility begins with me. Several executives exchanged uncertain glances. One attempted to explain that the policy had increased efficiency and protected shareholder value during difficult market conditions. William listened without interrupting. When the explanation ended, he slid another document across the table. It was Eli Johnson's denied treatment request with every personal detail except the medical facts concealed. This file is not a statistic, William said. It is a child whose treatment was delayed because we measured cost more carefully than compassion. The room became completely still. He continued in the same calm voice that had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions for years. Effective immediately, every pending pediatric oncology appeal is to be reopened. Independent physicians, not financial analysts, will review every case. Families already denied coverage will receive immediate reconsideration without additional fees or paperwork. The president of Carter Health Alliance hesitated before speaking. That decision could cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars. William met his eyes without hesitation. Then let it cost us. Profit can recover. Lost time cannot. Nobody argued after that. Less than 2 hours later, William returned to St. Margaret Community Hospital carrying nothing except the white envelope Maya had accidentally dropped outside the night before. He asked the receptionist only one question. Has Maya Johnson arrived yet? The receptionist smiled warmly. She stopped by before sunrise after finishing her breakfast shift. She is upstairs with her little brother now. William thanked her quietly and stepped toward the elevator. As the doors closed, he looked down at the envelope resting in his hands. This time he noticed a small sentence Maya had written beneath the hospital address, almost too small to see. Never stop believing that tomorrow can be different. For the first time in many years, William realized that the woman serving tables at his restaurant had been teaching him about leadership all along, and she had done it without ever knowing she was his greatest lesson. William found Maya sitting beside Eli's bed exactly where the receptionist had said she would be. Morning sunlight filtered softly through the hospital window, painting quiet streaks of gold across the blanket, while Eli worked carefully on a small puzzle spread across his tray table. Maya looked up as the door opened, and surprise immediately crossed her face. She stood instinctively, smoothing the sleeves of the same black uniform she had worn through the previous night in an early breakfast shift. Mr. Carter, she asked quietly, unable to understand why the owner of Carter House was standing inside a pediatric hospital carrying a simple white envelope. William stepped forward and held it out with both hands. You dropped this outside last night. Maya accepted it with visible relief. Thank you. I thought I had lost it. She paused before adding, I did not know you saw me here. William looked around the small room before answering. I followed you. Maya's expression tightened, not with anger, but with confusion. Before she could speak again, William continued. I thought I was following an employee. Instead, I found someone far stronger than I ever realized. Silence settled gently over the room. Eli looked between them with curious eyes before returning to his puzzle. William reached into his coat and carefully placed another folder on the bedside table. This is not charity, he said. It is accountability. Maya slowly opened the folder. Inside was an official letter from Carter Health Alliance confirming that Eli's insurance denial had been completely reversed. Every approved treatment, every specialist consultation, every medication, and every related expense would be fully covered immediately. Attached behind it was a second document announcing the permanent cancellation of the policy that had delayed care for families like hers. Maya read each page carefully, her hands trembling almost imperceptibly. When she finished, She closed the folder and looked directly at William. You changed the policy. William nodded. Not because I am generous. Because it was wrong. Maya remained silent for several long seconds before asking the question that mattered most. Will this help only my brother? William slowly shook his head. No. It will help every family whose application was denied under that policy. The reviews have already begun. Tears gathered in Maya's eyes, but they never fell. Instead, she offered the same quiet dignity that had carried her through every impossible day. Then thank you, she whispered. Not for us. For the families who will never know why tomorrow suddenly became possible. Eli looked up from his puzzle and smiled brightly. Does this mean Maya can finally sleep? The room filled with gentle laughter. William smiled for the first time in what felt like years. I certainly hope so. As he turned to leave, Maya stopped him with one final sentence. You know, Mr. Carter, money did not change this story. William looked back. She smiled softly. A decision did. Walking through the hospital corridor once more, William realized she was right. Wealth had built his company, but compassion would determine its legacy. Outside, the snow had finally stopped. Parents carried coffee instead of fear. Children laughed somewhere down the hallway. The city looked exactly the same as it had the night before, yet everything had changed. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is not the one who signs the check. Sometimes it is the one who quietly reminds the world that every policy touches a human life. Every stranger carries an unseen story, and every tomorrow begins with the simple courage to care.